What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that The Gentleman is no perfect movie. And it follows Charlie Hunnam, who is second in command of a marijuana empire run by Matthew McConaughey, and he sets out to discover why a triad group played by Henry Golding is trying to sabotage their business, but all the while he's being followed and blackmailed by a sleazy reporter played by Hugh Grant. I was excited for this movie just because Hugh Grant is going back to directing a gangster comedy. The casting that he's got was incredibly impressive, full of actors who you wouldn't really associate with a movie like this, and I can safely say the performances are among the best part of this movie. Charlie Hunnam, if you're not a fan of his, this is not gonna convert you or turn you over to him, but as someone who loved him on Sons of Anarchy, I was satisfied with his performance. It's kind of what you would expect from him. He's used to playing second in commands, especially during the first few seasons of Sons, but at the same time, he does a good job at it. He's someone who's very quiet and subdued and doesn't really like to get his hands dirty unless it's absolutely necessary. And when he does, he is controllably, but still angry and violent, and takes a little bit of pleasure in that as a result, especially one scene where he confronts a few people in a crack house. Hugh Grant, in regards to his costume and this almost cockney like accent that he has, makes him practically unrecognizable, and I mean that in the best possible way. This might actually be one of my new favorite Hugh Grant performances because dude's just having such a good time being sleazy and cocky and feeling like nobody can take him out, like he has this golden amount of information. And when you find out what he wants to do with that information, it's actually kind of funny just how pathetic it is. But my favorite performance for sure was Colin Farrell as Coach because this character was the biggest surprise in the entire movie. When I first saw the trailer, I thought he was going to kind of be a knockoff of Brad Pitt in Snatch, have his accent be driving most of the humor in this movie, and once in a while it does happen here and there, but no, this character was quirky in such a unique way. His motivations were a lot different from the other characters because without giving anything away, he's not actually a criminal. He just kind of gets roped into the situation when associates of his, who are also legitimate, do something remarkably stupid, but also in a clever and funny way. Matthew McConaughey was good in this movie too, but I felt like he could have added a little bit of energy to his character. He tries to be this really sly and clever gangster boss who tries to, say everything not quietly as possible, but just as calm and relaxed, like he owns control of everything. And most of the time it does work, but there are one or two scenes where he didn't have to go over the top angry, but he could have been angry a little bit. And I feel like actors are trying so hard in just about any kind of movie to be as subdued as possible, and while it works in some scenes, it's not foolproof. The only performance that was disappointing was Michelle Dockery as McConaughey's wife, and it wasn't that she was bad. She was very feisty and dominant, even more so than McConaughey, and that was the thing that made her interesting, despite the fact that she technically isn't involved in his business in any way. And she does have one badass moment that I wasn't entirely expecting because it was foreshadowed earlier, but I just sat there and went, that's too stupid to be a twist, but it's Guy Ritchie, so I should have seen that coming. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by that moment. Outside of that, she really doesn't have anything to do. And that kind of leads me into the two problems that I have with this movie. One is that the amount of screen time that actors have is really inconsistent, except for Charlie Hunnam and Hugh Grant, who get the most amount of scenes together because the blackmail conflict mostly revolves around them in this cat and mouse game where Hugh Grant is being very cocky and slimy and is gloating about himself while Charlie Hunnam's just sitting there thinking, yeah, whatever, I don't care. And those scenes were surprisingly effective. They weren't all that funny or intense, but they were interesting. But there are scenes like Colin Farrell as Coach trying to resolve the conflict within his own group that I felt like you could have put in more scenes. It would have been funnier. It would have fleshed him and his boys out a lot more. But he was in it a lot less than I was expecting him to be. Even the villains aren't really in it all that much. Henry Golding, I've lost track of how many scenes he was in, and I legitimately don't mind him as an actor, and he wasn't quote unquote bad, but if you put him in more often, his motivations, again, well, actually, for starters, he would have had a motivation other than just, I want more. Which leads me into the second problem. As usual with a Guy Ritchie movie, the plot and the twists matter a little bit more than character motivations. The motivations in these movies can be summed up in like one or two sentences. McConaughey's motivation: loves his wife. That's that. Charlie Hunnam's, honestly, I'm not even entirely sure. And the twists in this movie, some of which were interesting and some I didn't expect, and most of that was because of Guy Ritchie's direction, because as usual, he's very energetic. He keeps the movie moving at a fluid enough pace, but there are some twists in this movie that I didn't see coming because it relied more on being unpredictable as opposed to just foreshadowing it properly. And yeah, some twists can be really unpredictable. That doesn't mean they're good. In fact, some of these twists don't even make sense. When a couple characters realize that someone they know is in trouble, they randomly out of nowhere find a bunch of machine guns and say, "We're gonna whack these people out for you." And I watched this movie with my family and we were all like, when was that set up? When did they have all that stuff at their disposal? And I'm just like, I don't know. Plus, there's a scene involving Hugh Grant in a movie studio with a Man from Uncle poster. You know, the movie Guy Ritchie directed that had Hugh Grant in it. Prick. So yeah, for a Guy Ritchie movie, it is writing-wise as convoluted and twist-oriented as usual. The direction, I surprisingly didn't notice a ton of things outside of a really cool title sequence that sets up these characters in a really badass way. And I will say this, he knows how to use perspective in a way to hide certain things from us to make the twists that work feel effective, because they were right in front of us. We just didn't notice certain things in the background, or he cleverly hid stuff away from the line of vision. So some of those things worked. And I would honestly recommend this movie just for the performances alone. Charlie Hunnam, Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell with the very few scenes that he has, and Hugh Grant doing something that is completely out of the box for him. I hope he keeps doing more stuff like this in the future. So on the whole, the movie was fine, and I'm going to give The Gentleman a 3.5 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. Be sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of The Gentleman, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.